Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm sharing some easy and delicious tray bake dinner ideas. The first recipe is for a tofu chicken, mushroom and vegetable fajita tray bake. For this I took an extra large block of tofu. This is extra firm already, but I just drained off the water. So whatever tofu you're using, make sure it's well pressed first. It's the most important step to good tofu. Then all I did was tear off pieces of the tofu into these bite-sized chunks. There's no right or wrong way to do this, just get stuck in there. But don't make them too small because once they're baked, they do tend to shrink a little in size. I then placed the tofu pieces in a mixing bowl and then I made the kind of rub for it. So for this, I took a tablespoon of chili powder in a bowl, 2 teaspoons of smoked paprika, a teaspoon of dried oregano, a teaspoon of onion granules, a teaspoon of garlic granules, and then half a teaspoon each of ground cumin and coriander, a quarter of a teaspoon of cayenne pepper, and then a good pinch of sea salt and a good crack of black pepper. I then poured in 2 tablespoons of olive oil. I mixed the rub together until well combined and then I just poured that in over the tofu. I used my hands to then coat all of the tofu pieces in the rub. I just find this the easiest way to do it, and using a utensil can break up the tofu even more. But once it's baked, it weirdly looks like chicken and it tastes so good. I set the coated tofu in the fridge to continue kind of marinating in that rub, and then I prepared the veg. So for this I took a red onion and I cut that into wedges. You don't want to slice these too thin as they'll again just shrink into nothing when baking. I also took 100 grams of mixed mushrooms. Any mushrooms will work for this. Oyster mushrooms, portobello mushrooms. I took around 50 grams each of shiitake mushrooms and chestnut mushrooms, and I just sliced those up, again not too thinly because they do cook very quickly. I then took a green, red and yellow bell pepper, trimmed them and then cut them into chunky slices. I next took my baking tray and then I laid out all of the veg on it. I took the red onion wedges and I just broke those up, added on the sliced mushrooms and sliced peppers. I then drizzled on another good tablespoon of olive oil over everything, seasoned really well with some more sea salt and a good crack of black pepper. Then I got stuck in with my hands again and I just gave everything a good mix together to get all of the mushrooms and vegetables coated well in the oil and the seasonings. I then removed the coated tofu pieces from the fridge and I just scattered those over the tray. Then I just took a spatula and gently turned the tofu through the vegetables to get it all well distributed, and also so that some of the vegetables got coated in the spices from the tofu. I had already preheated my oven at this point to 180 degrees Celsius, so I just placed that in the oven to bake for around 30 minutes. While it was baking in the oven, I used the time to make some fresh tomato salsa and guacamole. For the salsa, I took 10 cherry tomatoes and I just roughly chopped them up as fine as I could get them. I added those to a small bowl and then I took 4 pickled red jalapeno slices. These were just from a jar. Obviously you could use green. If you don't want too much of a heat kick, you could just use some red onion instead. I chopped those up and added them in. I then took a good handful of fresh coriander and chopped that up really finely too, with the stalks included because these have so much flavour and don't need to go to waste. I added the chopped coriander to the bowl too, then I squeezed in the juice of half a lime. I drizzled in some olive oil, around a teaspoon, and then I seasoned really well with some salt and black pepper and gave it all a good mix together. After around 15 minutes or halfway through, I just shuffled the tray bake to make sure everything was cooking evenly. Then I also made some guacamole. For this I took 2 ripe avocados and I just mashed them up. I like leaving it kind of chunky for texture. Then I had also finely chopped up 6 more cherry tomatoes. I added those in with the avocado along with 4 sliced pickled jalapenos, a good handful of chopped fresh coriander, the juice of the other half of the lime, a teaspoon of olive oil, and then seasoned well with some salt and black pepper. Then I just gave it all a good mix together. I then took some flour tortillas and wrapped them in some tin foil to go in the oven. This is just so that they don't get soggy on the tray, and I left it open enough to warm through, but I just covered the edges so that they didn't catch. I then made some way on the tray by moving everything over a little, and then I just placed those on for the last minute or so to warm through. Once everything was ready, I removed the tortillas from the tin foil. This is just like a serving suggestion. The whole tray can be placed in the middle of the table, and whether it's with friends or family, everyone can just tuck in and help themselves. At this point, the mushrooms and vegetables should be nicely caramelized, and the texture of that tofu chicken honestly is so good. For serving at the table purposes, I also added on some lime wedges, some more jalapenos because I'm a bit of a heat kick freak, and some fresh coriander. As I said, you can just serve this up the way it is. It's such a quick and easy dinner. But the flavours, the tofu is spicy, slightly tangy from that fajita spice blend. The texture is so meaty, as I said. The mushrooms and the vegetables are sweet from caramelising. Then with the fiery jalapenos, the fresh coriander and the zingy lime all wrapped up in a warm flour tortilla, it's just delicious. I love adding on some of the guacamole as a base. It's cooling and refreshing, but if you didn't want to add the jalapenos in this, you could again use some red onion instead. But the tomatoes also add some freshness. I also added on some Oatly creme fraiche as the kind of sour cream element. It's got a bit of a tang to it anyway, and it just adds some creaminess. Throw in some more coriander, and that's that. Obviously this is a tray bake video, but this tofu and veg filling also works great in enchiladas, tacos, or if you're really going all out on some loaded nachos. You can throw in some vegan cheese too. It's just such a great dinner to share with family and friends. The second recipe is for a sausage and roast vegetable tray bake. For this, I made a marinade first with a teaspoon of dried mixed herbs, a teaspoon of smoked paprika, half a teaspoon of dried chili flakes, 2 minced cloves of garlic, a good pinch of salt and a crack of black pepper, and then I poured in 2 tablespoons of maple syrup and 2 tablespoons of olive oil, and gave everything in the bowl a good mix together to combine it. I then just set the marinade aside and got the rest of the ingredients. I took 4 medium-sized potatoes and a red onion. I had already washed and scrubbed the potatoes, so then I just sliced them into wedges by halving them, then halving them again. I set those aside while I chopped up the red onion, and again for this, I cut the onion into wedges. I didn't slice these too thinly because, like I said with the fajita bake, they just cook so quickly. I then took my large baking dish and I first placed in the potatoes and then the red onion. Next, I took a jar of roasted red peppers. I had drained off all of the liquid and just gave them a light pat dry. So I next added those into the dish and I just tore up any larger pieces. I then added in 200 grams of cherry tomatoes on the vine. And next I took some vegan sausages. I like to cook from scratch as much as possible, as you guys know, but with these tray bakes it's hard to come up with a main kind of protein source for each one. that doesn't feature a pre-made product, but these sausages are by Thanks Plants. They're a small Irish business, so I wanted to give them a mention. This isn't sponsored. The sausages are delicious and they're actually made from seitan, which are my favourite kind of sausages. I do have my own seitan sausage recipe, which I'll share at some point, but for this we're using a bit of a shortcut. These were the tomato and herb flavour. I just removed all of the packaging and nestled them into the dish. Any vegan sausages will work for this really. I then took my marinade, which had been sitting, and I just poured that in over the top of all the ingredients. And then I just got stuck in with my hands and gave everything a good mix together to get all of the vegetables and the sausages coated in that glaze. Being careful because of the cherry tomatoes, and you may lose a few off the vine at this point. I gave the dish a bit of a shuffle as well, just to get any of the excess marinade evenly distributed in the base of the dish. I had preheated my oven to 180 degrees Celsius, so I then placed it in the oven to bake for 35 to 40 minutes. Every 15 minutes or so, I just gave it a shuffle, and because I was using seitan sausages, I didn't want them to be drying out, so I made sure that they were kept moist the whole time in extra marinade. Then around 5 minutes before it was ready, I sprinkled in 2 tablespoons of pine nuts just to lightly toast them, and then when everything was nicely golden and caramelized, I removed it from the oven. I then took some vegan red pesto just to splash over the top, and I also took some fresh basil leaves and just tore those up into the dish. You can serve it up like this. This serves 2 people, but you could add in more sausages and more potatoes to serve more people, and everyone can help themselves. I served this up on plates, and I just tried to get a good selection of everything per dish. And then you can serve it up with even more red pesto and basil to add on if you like. This again is such a great, quick and easy dinner for me, and the sausages are perfect for something like this. But as I said, you could use any vegan sausages. There are so many on the market now. You could even make this dish with different vegan sausages each time to switch it up. I love them with the potato wedges. They're crispy on the outside and fluffy in the middle. You can never go wrong with roasted cherry tomatoes on the vine. They're so sweet and juicy. I use the pre-roasted red peppers in the jar, but they go even more caramelized once roasted again. But you could use fresh sweet peppers chopped up. The red onion is sweet and tangy. Then the buttery toasted pine nuts add a bit of a crunch. The pesto, just little hits of flavour each time you get a bite. And the basil just adds freshness to everything with its amazing flavour. It's definitely one of my favourite kind of tray bakes. Then the third and final recipe is for a smoky jackfruit lentil crust pizza. First, I made a marinade for the jackfruit, and for this I mixed 3 tablespoons of ketchup in a bowl with 1 tablespoon of soy sauce, a tablespoon of balsamic vinegar, a tablespoon of maple syrup, a teaspoon of olive oil, a teaspoon of liquid smoke, a teaspoon of smoked paprika, a teaspoon of garlic granules, and then a good sprinkle of sea salt and a good crack of some black pepper. I mixed it all together until it was well combined and smooth. I took a can of jackfruit next. I just drained off the water in the can through a sieve over the sink, and then to get all of the water out of the actual jackfruit, I placed it in a tea towel and again squeezed out as much water as I could, which just allows the jackfruit to soak up as much flavour as possible and makes it a lot less watery. Once I'd removed as much liquid as possible, I placed it into a mixing bowl. Then I took the marinade and just poured that in over it. I mixed the marinade through the jackfruit while pulling it apart using 2 forks at the same time, just breaking up the bigger pieces. I leave the seeds in since these are completely edible and contain lots of fibre and nutrients. They don't need to go to waste. Until the jackfruit was shredded and coated well in the marinade. Then I placed it in the fridge to marinate while I made the pizza base. For this I poured 2 cups of water into my Vitamix blender. I then took 2 cups of dry, uncooked red lentils and I placed those in a sieve. I then gave them a really good rinse through under running water to wash them well until the water started to run clear. I then gave them a good shake off to remove any excess water, and then I added the lentils to the blender along with 3 tablespoons of nutritional yeast, a tablespoon of olive oil, a teaspoon of garlic granules, a teaspoon of onion granules, a teaspoon of dried herbs and a pinch of salt. I then blended that up on a high speed in my Vitamix for around 2 minutes until it was a completely smooth mixture. I then took a baking tray and lightly brushed it with a little bit of olive oil. My tray is 37 centimeters in length, so anything around this size is perfect. I then poured the lentil pizza base onto the tray, and then I took a spatula just to spread it out evenly, and I also tapped the tray on the work surface to bring any air bubbles to the surface. I had preheated my oven to 180 degrees Celsius already, so then I placed the lentil base pizza in the oven to bake for 20 minutes. While the base was baking, I prepared the rest of the toppings. I took a green pepper and I sliced that up into rings. I also took a red onion, halved it and only ended up using half, and I just sliced that up. Then once the pizza base was ready, I removed it from the oven, and while the surface is cooked, the base more than likely will still be a little bit underdone. So what I do is place my chopping board on the top of the tray, then I flip it over and remove the tray from the top. The base should just fall out, but you may need to give it a gentle tap. Then I place the tray back underneath, and using the chopping board and a spatula, I just slide the base back into the tray. This is quite easy to do as it seems to hold its form pretty well. I then put my toppings on the undercooked side, as this will then finish baking once it goes back in the oven. For the pizza sauce, I just added a garlic and herb passata. I spread that out on the base, almost up to the edges, just leaving a little bit of a crust around the outside. Then for my toppings, I took the pulled smoky jackfruit from the fridge and I just spread that out evenly across the top. I then took some caramelized onion chutney and using a teaspoon, I just dotted that across the pizza. I added on the green pepper slices next, as well as the red onion. Then I took some vegan shredded mozzarella cheese and I just sprinkled that over the top. This is optional and you can of course use whatever you like as toppings. Once it was ready, I then placed the pizza back in the oven to bake and for the cheese to melt for a total of 20 minutes. Then once it was completely done, I removed it from the oven. It was looking and smelling so good at this point. I also then took some fresh flat basil leaves and just roughly tore them up and scattered them over the top of the pizza. Again, you can slice this up and then serve it, but it's also another great one to just put in the center of the table, slice it up and everyone can help themselves. I've shared another variation of this lentil crust pizza before, but on the hob. But again, this is such a great, quick and easy dinner idea that's done on one tray. The lentil base is a great healthier alternative and also a high protein alternative. It tastes amazing and works so great as a base, and with the smoky pulled jackfruit on top, that adds so much flavour and a meaty texture. The onion chutney adds some sweetness and amazing bold onion flavour. The vegetables are also slightly caramelised. The vegan cheese adds some creaminess and brings everything together nicely, and the basil works really well with all of the other flavours. I cut this into 8 slices so that it could serve 2 to 4 people, and it's another one that the whole family or a group of friends can tuck into and enjoy. That is it for today's tray bake video. I hope you enjoyed it. The recipes are in the description box as always. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you'd like to see some more tray bake recipes, and I will see you again soon. Bye!